What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. How are you this morning, sir, or this afternoon?
I'm doing well. How are you, my friend? That was awesome. Had Tucker on. Big week.
Ooh, yeah, it was a big show. It's been a big week. And of course, I think this is another big show today, Rob, because of course, last night was election night. And there's so much to say about this, and I there's no one I'd rather sit down and break it down with than you, Rob. This was, well, I mean, let's start with this. This was a big moment in American history last night. You know, that was, first of all, Mamdani's victory is a historic victory, no matter how you feel about it. You know, this is a big deal. The fact is that we are in a rapidly changing country with rapidly changing political dynamics. But the fact that, you know, in open socialists, a socialist, Muslim, young, charismatic guy just became the mayor of the biggest city in America is a very big deal. So we're going to talk a bunch about that, obviously, and what this means. Also, the bigger picture of the election, undeniably, was that the Democrats had a good night. And this wasn't a midterm election. It wasn't the House and the Senate and a bunch of states on the line. It was a small off-year election. However, there were three very big races last night. There was the gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey, and there was the mayoral race in the biggest city in the United States of America. All three of them went the Democrats' way. All three pretty handily. And that's a good night for the Democrats. And a good night for the Democrats is a huge story right now. And, you know, I would argue a concerning one. But, you know, obviously we give our opinions on this stuff, but just breaking it down as an analyst, the Democrats were a year ago today at the worst place I've ever seen one of the major two political parties in my lifetime. I don't think anyone could really argue with that. I mean, look, I wasn't alive during Watergate, but even during Watergate, man, like they still had a Republican president and they had won 49 out of the 50 states in the previous presidential election. There's really the humiliation of the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you know, disaster in 2024, and the humiliation of Donald Trump having been, you know, the person that they launched more arrows at than any other person, coming in and beating them again. The Democratic establishment has been in ruins ever since then. Their approval ratings have been like 25%, just absolutely doing as bad as a political party could be doing. And they had a good night last night, and that's something they desperately needed. So that's a big deal already. So yeah, that's the, you know, just the factual, you know, what happened last night. It was a good night for the Democrats, and it was a historic night for Zohran Mamdani, who is now going to be the mayor of New York City. And there's a lot in there to break down. But I don't know. You can even lead us off here, Rob. Any thoughts on any of these races last night?
I think there's a lot going on. Off the bat, I will say that these are all fairly Democratic areas, so I don't know that you would have seen a Republican victory. From what I was digging into, I guess these were outsized Democratic victories, and the fact that Zohran, an absolute socialist, was able to win is incredibly concerning. I think what this speaks to more than anything is Donald Trump cannot just Jedi trick go, no inflation, jobs are great, my policies are great, and just keep repeating it over and over and trick people into that everything's amazing. And we're kind of, I mean, it's still great that on the national level, the Democrats have nearly no bench and they are worse than Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is in every war. He's trying to get us into more wars. His tariff policy, at least at the moment, hasn't brought prosperity. I think I still don't think we've seen the worst of it. but there's nothing he's doing that feels like it's America first. I mean, we're seeing it more than anything with what's going on with you, Tucker, and everyone else, is you guys are just anti-war, and the right tries to shame you guys out of the movement as if you don't represent the majority of the country right now. But I think the Republicans are failing incredibly. They're getting the blame for the shutdown, which usually the Republicans are the ones shutting it down and they get the blame. But for some reason, that's not working well for them. And I think it just speaks to Donald Trump's just lying of it's going to be great is easy when you're on the outside. But when you're on the inside and you're actually in charge, you're making the decisions and people don't see it being any better. It doesn't help if you just try and lie to them like Biden and go, no, there is no inflation. No, there is no problems. Everything is better.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, and because I want to be reasonable with this, and I have said this before, particularly about the Mamdani situation, but let me just reiterate it once again now that he has officially won, even though that seemed like it was clearly going to happen. And he, he won handily too. He even beat the spread. So there's no talk that, oh, that Republican guy is the reason why Cuomo lost. But Mamdani being the mayor represents many people's failures, including mine and yours. Like, I'm not absolving us from this.
I'm not accepting that.
Well,
I accept zero responsibility for this. I did everything I could to shame Cuomo. The fact that guy came back and the Democrats allowed him to.
No, I more just mean that any of us who have been, arguing for sound economics and free markets and all of this, I feel like, goddamn, I've been on a lot of big platforms over the last few years, and I guess I have not convinced enough people.
People took more vaccines and drank more fluoride than you and I could have ever expected, and you can only reason with them so much.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I'm being very serious here. Like, I've been, look, obviously we take less responsibility. We're not as important as, but I just mean that it's us, it's every other libertarian podcaster, it's every conservative commentator, it's every institute and think tank. It's like, hey, Cato and Mises, and I mean the organizations that I love, the Mises Institute, the Libertarian Institute, all of Conservatism Inc., all of the Republican Party. What a goddamn failure. You have been essentially probably nothing has kept what America's the broadest of broad, big tent, conservative right-wing world since the end of World War II. The thing that has been the lone consensus issue has been anti-communism, anti-socialism. There was a there was a split between like the Cold Warriors who wanted to fight communism globally, militarily, and the more non-interventionist right-wingers who thought that might turn us into too much of a communist country if we go and try to create government programs to fight communism. But the one thing that united all of them was being opposed to this, being opposed to socialism. And so if you look at all the effort, 60 years of effort, and at the end of that, the biggest city in the country elects an openly socialist candidate. I'm just saying that's a failure on everybody's part. Like we did not make the argument convincingly enough, or making the argument convincingly enough isn't really what it's all about, and there's some other path. But that being said, well, look, it also, of course, Mamdani being elected also is a result of the failures of the establishment of the Democratic Party, obviously, right? It's that the fact that Cuomo was in such a weakened position that he can't even look at essentially a communist kid and go, get out of here, man. The adults know what they're doing here. Like the fact, like, how bad would you have to be the son of a governor, the former governor, like a guy who had every advantage he's been in New York City before Mamdani was I was going to say a citizen, but that's like not even close. Before Mamdani was a thought, he's been in the city since before Mamdani was alive, and he's got, all the connections to the establishment. I mean, just huge advantages, but he did such a bad job that he couldn't even convince New York voters that, like, look, you really want to go with a guy who has no experience, who's been a citizen for 5 minutes, who's preaching communism? That's who you want to go with? You have to fuck up really, really bad for the average person to go over you. Yes. You know?
Well, when you put up a guy with a beret and a person who killed people's grandmothers, and then you got to govern New York and you start making it a referendum on having more support for Israel, you're choosing to lose. Now, as to why this kid came out of nowhere, generated so much excitement, and people are so dumb that they're voting for socialism, I think I mean, it speaks to people's stupidity and their belief in government to provide them free stuff, and just candidates, even like Donald Trump, that are willing to speak to the working class and go, hey, everyone else is stealing from you. I'm going to try and make it better.
Well, look, I mean, there's no class. There's no question. All of those things are factors. Now, look, Rob, had they had more time, maybe they could have asked him to visit Israel one more time. Maybe that would have been enough, but there was only so many times you could ask him to visit Israel, and it just none of it. So look, there's a failure all around here, and I'm not even passing the buck. Like, I'll accept some of the failure here. God damn, we really got to convince this next generation that socialism is like not what they want to embrace. It's going to be a goddamn disaster. It's guaranteed to be a disaster. And in fact, it will be exactly as disastrous as much of it is tried. Like, that will be exactly how much of a disaster it is. But look, to the thing, and you got at it right away, and I think actually we should spend quite a bit more time talking about this. But the biggest failure, right? Like, in the same sense that, like, I'd say, like, even the Mises Institute, I'll put some of the blame on, right? But then obviously who takes so much more of the blame is Conservatism Inc., because you guys actually had all of the backing and all of the budget and all of the numbers and everything, and still couldn't deliver this message, and still couldn't convince people that freedom beats despotism. That was the task, by the way, was convincing people that, like, you getting to be the author of your own script is not preferable to some bureaucrat being the author of your destiny. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Proton Drive. If you're tired of big tech snooping through your files, switch to Proton Drive. It's end-to-end encrypted cloud storage trusted by over 100 million people worldwide, so only you can access your photos, work, and personal files. It's free to sign up and supports our show when you do it. Check them out. Proton Drive, much safer and more secure than other alternatives. If you're interested, we have a link in the episode description. You can click on that and go check it out for yourself. And yeah, Proton Drive, a more secure way to store your photos and files. All right, let's get back into the show. Like that, anyway. So in that same spirit, look, the Democrats having a good night here. And yes, Rob, you're right. These were, I mean, you know, look, they were Democrat favored areas. I don't know if I'd quite say Democratic strongholds outside of New York City. The previous gubernatorial race in New Jersey was substantially closer than this one. And Virginia is okay. Like, I mean, Obama carried Virginia and stuff, but like, it's not California. Like, I don't know. Like, and especially, I got to say, in a year coming off of the humiliation in 2024, and the Democratic Party having an approval rating in the 20s, and after COVID, and after Joe Biden, and after Kamala Harris, I don't know, is it that wild to think like, hey, Republicans, if you get your shit together, you could be competitive in Virginia? Because they weren't competitive. They got blown out. And I'm sorry, this is a failure of the Trump administration. I mean, let's just be honest about this. And what the hell is the point in not being honest about that? And Rob, you know, I think you laid out a lot of the things there for sure. I mean, look, let's just say it like this. Donald Trump came into his second term. He's about a year in, right? A little short of a year in his second term. He came into it with his record high approval ratings, the highest approval ratings he had ever had. Donald Trump had, in what was kind of an unthinkable way just a couple years earlier, Donald Trump had flipped everything around. He had won the day. He had taken back the culture. He had taken back the moment. He had his highest approval ratings. UFC heavyweight champions are doing the Trump dance after they win. He's with Rogan, and he's with Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz, and he's like recaptured this thing. He has his best electoral performance by far of the 3 times he's run, gets the most votes, finally wins the popular vote, wins every single swing state, wins the House, wins the Senate, has the Supreme Court, perfectly. And now, less than a year later, this party that was in the dumps has a solid night, outperforming where they had been in these states in the last few years. And Donald Trump is right back to his approval ratings being in the gutter. I mean, this whole thing, look, and look, to your point, I don't think, obviously we're all somewhat tempted to kind of like put our own, to as everybody in this world is, you're always kind of tempted to seek confirmation bias and to find out that the answer here is that I was already right about all of this stuff. But I'm sorry, if you're just trying to if you're looking for just sober analysis here, right? All 3 of the big 3 races from last night, which is the governor of Virginia, the governor of New Jersey, and the mayor of New York City, all 3 of them, the winning candidates, centered their campaign around the unaffordability crisis. All of them. In other words, Rob, it's still about the same thing that it was always about, which is the economy, and more specifically, that the price of everything is outrageously high. It's still, and so essentially, for all the other distractions, Donald Trump could sit here and try to spin it in whatever way he wants to about how wonderful everything's going. But the truth is that, the CPI says what? We were like a little over 3% or something like that year to date. It's like, okay, so what that means to the regular person is that all the pain of the Biden inflation plus more. Things are more expensive now than they were during the worst of the crisis of the Biden administration, right? So that essentially, now the government, of course, because they have government math and DC economists, and they'll try to spin this in a million different ways. But what it actually means, right? Like, as we always say, right, the CPI is like, which, forget the way that's calculated, but prices in general, it's the increase in prices like gaining weight. It's not, oh, well, it went up by 4% last year, but 3% this year, so we're down 1%. No, it's not. We're up 7%, or actually more than that if you do the compound math, whatever. But the point is that things are worse. The same crisis is still there, but is even worse now. And guess what? I'm not even saying that people have been completely persuaded by our arguments on foreign policy, although more and more of them certainly have been. But no matter how much you want to brag about bombing Yemen or toppling the Syrian government or backing Israel as they attempt to kill every last man, woman, and child in Gaza, or bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, or bombing, boats off the coast of Venezuela, but any of this shit, no, what has that done for America? Any of it? All of this investment, the right wing being totally split over all of these fights over foreign wars. None of this is doing anything for the America First agenda. None of this is doing anything for making life better for Americans. And look, by and large, you can just look at this stuff. The tariff policy has been incoherent and, frankly, somewhat unhinged. I don't know what to say. There's a lot of just the bullshit is back, and there's a lot of talk about all these different things. There's a lot of interviews where he's calling someone fake news or doing whatever. But when it comes down to it, on the issues that really matter, the American people are not seeing some night and day difference. They're not. Essentially, you had a golden opportunity, but you really haven't delivered that much. And look, though, even the one area where Donald Trump really has delivered the most, undeniably, is the border, and the border being under control. But mass deportations haven't happened. There's been a lot of noise about them, but they really haven't happened. And I guess, and maybe this is somewhat unfair, but I think in a lot of ways, while people are glad that the flow of migrants isn't what it used to be, Now we're just living with the results of all those millions of people coming in under Joe Biden. And it's not as if they're being removed. So we're just accepting that, like, okay, that happened to us and this is our country now. That's the best we can do, is like, okay, I got the bleeding to stop, but you're going to have to live with the wound. Okay, that's not like the best sell. The fundamentals of the economy are exactly the same, Rob. All of the problems, like, I mean, the major fundamental economic problems are all the same. We're debasing our currency to continue to essentially monetize the debt at a snail's pace or something like that, essentially just slowly destroying our currency to deal with the fact that we have a government that's way too big for us to be able to afford it. We're still getting involved in all these foreign conflicts. We still, you know, like, just all the fundamental problems are still there. And at the end of the day, when people are going to vote, the fact that Bobby Kennedy told us to stop taking Tylenol just isn't that great of a win, man. Like, what do we really have here? And so for all of the people, because it really is, this is like, I'm somebody, you know, I was talking about this with Tucker, Rob, but like, so many of, say, like, the more establishment Republican types who, like, you know, they really want to cancel Tucker or get people like me to just go away. And they're like, no, the real concern is the Democrats. You guys are always picking on the Republicans, but the real concern is the Democrats. So unlike them, I think I actually believe that a lot more. I'm very concerned about the Democrats actually getting back in power on a national level. But take a look at, if you are really concerned about that, then last night should be a big wake-up call for you. This party was so down and so out and so fucking stupid and talentless and destructive, and you allowed them back into the